importance. And we're very excited to have Jan Chu here to share her butterfly research with us. So I'm going to let her take over, and here we go.
Thank you very much. I'm so glad to be here. Let's go out in the field together. I'm going to be looking at butterflies within Boulder County Open Space, especially today. Over the last 18 years, I used a unit so that I could compare from one area to another and one year to another. So the letter I is used to signify the butterfly individuals counted when we're out in the field. The RH is for the research hours that the group totally spent in the field, not individuals, but the total time we were out in the field. And so we have calculated the number of individual butterflies per research hour for all of the 8 open space areas that we have gone into. Last year, we had 10 research volunteers in the field. We put in 148 research hours for the county, and we watched the butterflies from April to September, and the weather was so good, we just kept watching into October. People always know, they always want to know if we can tell them what the trend is for butterflies, what's happening to our butterflies. And here we've been able to take into account all the butterflies that we counted, all the research hours, and all of the open space areas that we were in. We have found there seems to be a decrease of about 2% per year. That's looking at 2004 to 2021. There was an amazing find in the Geer Watershed after the October 2020 Calwood fire. In the summer of 2021, there seemed to be an outstanding number of butterflies. And we'll look at what kind they were. But look at the trend line for Geer Watershed is pretty much level ordinarily. But the count that we got in 2021 after the burn, when all the new grasses and flowers were coming up, look what happened to the count on 2021. What's interesting here, down the left-hand side are the species of butterflies that seem to be outstanding. And you'll probably recognize some of those names. I figured the mean or average for the last 5 years preceding last summer. So there's an average number of butterflies per research hour in the column that says mean 2016 to 2020. But compare the count that we got in 2021. Almost 5 times as many orange sulfurs, gray hairstreaks, unusually huge, common wood nymphs. Look at that. And the research hours that the group spent down in the bottom right-hand corner, only 18 research hours out in the field. So it wasn't as though we spent many more days or longer hours. Something happened after the burn that following summer when the butterflies just really came up. Their caterpillars apparently had food, and this was an outstanding find. We hope to run this route again in 2022. I'm going to show quite a few slides of butterflies, and each one I have the scientific name at the top, which you can look at or not. The photographer's name, the date that the picture was taken, and the place it was taken. Believe it or not, this is a Pygmy Blue that we find in the parking lot of Walden, in those white asters that had been mowed off, and in the gravel come up these tiny little plants in October. And that's when we look for this Pygmy Blue. Now I've arranged the slides not so much in terms of the family or genus, but I have done this in terms of when these butterflies are found. The white line gray hairstreak that used to be called Sheridan's comes out when the spring flowers just begin. The past flowers just start showing up, and the spring beauties often occur where the white line green hairstreak is in March, the end of March. We're about 2 weeks late, I feel, this season, so we haven't seen any of those yet. The mourning cloak has a life cycle of 1 whole year as an adult. So if this was seen in April, that mourning cloak has overwintered where it was dry inside a cottonwood tree bark or something of that sort. It's coming out now as an adult. It will mate and lay eggs. The caterpillars will go through the chrysalis stage, and the new mourning cloak will hatch out in about 6 weeks, but it will go into hibernation. Some of them fly in the summertime, but a lot of them will again hibernate until the fall, where they overwinter until the next spring. Amazing life cycle. Horikama is one that's found in the canyons with the mourning cloak, and it overwinters also. The green kama you're going to find at higher elevations, often where the aspen trees are. And I'm sorry this is automatically forwarding. I'm not doing that. Painted ladies have a wonderful life cycle. If we've had heavy rains down in the Mojave Desert and southwest California, it may be that we'll get a huge number of painted ladies. And they start out by going through their life cycle and coming out in March in California. Then they disperse. And about April, after the last winter snow, the painted ladies will show up here, and they continue to disperse toward the north. It's still a mystery what happens to these painted ladies over the winter time. We don't know for sure if they migrate in this country, but in Europe to Africa, they do migrate. We have about 5 species of whites that come out early in the spring. So in the beginning, we have to net these butterflies or take good photographs so we can figure out what they are. The western white is common in the foothills and at higher elevations. The ventral surface of the wing has darker lines around the veins quite often. The spring white is not so common, but it's a delicate butterfly that that you can find around stream beds where it's moist. The Olympia marble we find quite often. And the marble, we have 2 kinds of marbles. The next picture that is another marble will have a better picture of the way the marbling looks on the wings. The large marble, both the dorsal view on the left and the ventral view on the right show one that is fairly common around the foothills. And if you notice on the right, what appears to be greenish stripes, well, the pigment is black on the wing, and then the scales are yellow above the black. And so your brain puts this together and makes sort of a green color on those marble wings. It looks like marble. The elfins are early butterflies, and if you're up in the canyons now or soon, in April, you'll see the Moss's elfin. It's a rare butterfly, and it often lives where the sedum plants grow. It's a wonderful little butterfly, about 1.5 inches across when its wings are open. And when it's new, it has a wonderful azure or purplish sheen to the wings. The brown elfin is going to be found more up higher elevation in the pine trees quite often. And it's kind of unusual because the brownness is unlike other butterflies. Gray hairstreak is a favorite. And on the tail, on the right-hand side of the gray hairstreak, you see tails. They're little extensions of the hind wing. And very often the gray hairstreak will land head down. And those hair streaks, extensions of the wings, will move on their own. So when a lizard or a bird is looking for something to eat and it sees those red spots and it sees the motions of those hair streaks, that's the place I'm going to grab. So a lot of the hair streaks have bite marks that are left from birds that have struck them, but the butterfly flies to live another day. Hoary elfins are found around watery areas quite often. And you can see the scales on the right edge of the wing. It looks like frost flakes have been thrown across the wing. That's where the name hoary comes from. Pine elfins you'll see in the beginning of summer, and they'll be especially around small pine trees. You can see in the center picture, the abdomen of the female is very extended. She's full of eggs, and she's going to be looking for the very growing tips of new pine needles to put her eggs onto. These are wonderful, beautiful little decorated butterflies that often have a sheen to them of purplish color. Two kinds of sulfurs occur at our elevation, at the foot of the foothills, especially where the clovers and the alfalfa grow. If you look across an alfalfa field, you can see many clouded sulfurs and orange sulfurs. And the really only difference you can see is when this orange sulfur opens its wings up, you'll see more of a rosy colored band between the two wings, between the front wing and the hind wing. The Queen Alexandra's sulfur lives at higher elevations, and it would be in midsummer. The greenish color that you see is made from the green pigment on the butterfly's wing and the yellow wings covering those black scales. The Indra Swallowtail, I always look for this isosceles triangle of yellow that stretches across both wings. You'll find them in the pine trees. You'll find them where the parsleys grow, the parsley family. grows, and it's a swallowtail, but rather a short tail that you can see. One tail is gone. Somebody took a swipe at it already. The Echo Azure is one of the early blue butterflies, and it has scallops near the edge of the wing. And if the wings are open, you notice that the blue is rather a purplish blue color. Dreamy dusky wings occur when it's colder in the summertime and at higher altitudes. I look at the scientific name of the dreamy dusky wing. It's Isolus, and I always associate it with cooler temperatures or a little bit higher elevations. The other way you could identify this particular dusky wing is to look at its head, and it has palps extending from the head. So it makes it look like that butterfly has an extended head. The other dusky wings don't show that. The silvery blue is a wonderful butterfly that's around here very often. And it has black dots. And I often think about putting my favorite old silver coins out on the table in a row and appreciate my silver coins. And that's one way I can remember the silvery blue. Its blue wings, when they're open, are much more white. They are silvery compared to other blue butterflies. The western tail blue has a small tail, doesn't show very much here, and I don't have a pointer ability, so I can show that to you. Aha, there it is right there. There are the tails of the western tail blue. When I go through my mind and all of these 16 blues, I have to figure out what I'm looking at. When I have gone through my mind and the spots aren't right, and the tail's not right, and the color's not right on the dorsal side of the wing, oh, I look for a tiny tail. That butterfly is different from all of the other patterns that you'll see in the blues. Common checkered skipper. Now, common is not a derogatory word at all. It just means that it's found all over the country. It's found everywhere, and so it's common. And the checkered skipper lives a lot where it's very hot. It'll live where there are gravel spots. And when it flies, the black and the white kind of blend together and it looks very blue. They usually are found down on the ground around where the short plants are. They don't fly up in the air the way a lot of other butterflies do. The two-banded checkered skipper is much less common, and Venice finds this up at Caribou only for a couple of weeks. The Julia orange tip is really the one that we look for in the springtime. And if we find that, it's the treasure of the day. They're a little bit smaller than other whites, but they fly around in groups and that orange will show up as it flies past you. Here's the checkered white that is very common. The western white had darker markings on it, and the checkered white has more of grayness to the markings. You'll see more checkered whites around here than you see western whites. The black swallowtail, you've probably seen around dill plants or anything in the parsley family. The black swallowtails are, the males are quite black. The females have much larger blue spots on the hind wings. So the females have more blue on them. The western green hairstreak, we used to call the bramble hairstreak or the bramble green. No more, change the common name. And these you'll find easily on trails that you're hiking in the summertime. And what's wonderful is we only have a few green butterflies. And this one is truly green with the brick red showing at the base of the forward wing. There are several kinds of swallowtails. The pale swallowtail looks a little bit yellowish when it first emerges out of the chrysalis, but it's indeed white and large, easily 2.5 inches across when its wings are open. White and black, easy to see when you found the first one. And good sized tails on the pale swallowtail. To the right, there's an Indra Swallowtail, which in the books, the older books, will call it a short-tailed swallowtail. But there again, they've transferred that common name to a different butterfly. And this one locally we note as Indra. Pakuvius dusky wing. All of the dusky wings are speckly gray. The sunset part of the day colors. Sunset colors, lots of gray. The female has a lot of brown. The male has more blackness. And if you notice the margin on the hind wing of the male, this is what gives it away. There's a black margin on the hind wing of the male. And that's easy to find once you see that. On the female, it tends to be a little brownish. The Perseus dusky wing is another gray sunset color. But what you do to know that, if you can see the 4 or 5, they look like white spots in the forward wing. But if you're lucky enough to hold one in your net or the tweezers and you look up against the sky, you can actually see sky through those clear parts of the wing. There are no scales there. So that's Perseus. That's fairly common around here. Northern cloudy wing has this wonderful bronzy, purpley iridescence. Not very common, but hopefully you'll see one sometime in the summer. There are several calliope. There are several fritillary butterflies. They have a new genera given to the group. So if you see the name Argynnis, you'll say, what is that? Because in your books, it will not show that particular scientific name for the genus of the fritillaries. On the right is the Variegated Fritillary, which is much more common, and it has blocks of color, squares as it were, or checkers. You'll see this now coming up. They come in from the south and the east, and sometimes they have a second brood here in Boulder. Gorgone checker spot, we're looking for a butterfly with a lot of checkers on the wings. Not truly clear checkers, but they're called checker spots. And the gorgone is often found near stream beds, near moisture. The way I know that one is if you look at the right-hand picture, can you see this zigzag, 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 white line right down through the wing? To me, that's what shows up. I'm a bit colorblind, so anything I can find that's black and white, I use that to identify it. The common ringlet, again, common, it's everywhere, but the ringlet that we have in Boulder County has a subspecies name, Ocratia, and we used to call it the ochre ringlet, but now it's the common. And notice the little ringlet in the forewing. The ringlet will show up on ringlets throughout the country, but our subspecies has much more patterning on the ventral hind wing than many of the other subspecies. Juba Skipper is one that you'll probably see, but the trouble is with skippers, you see them and they're gone, they skip around. The way this is distinguished is that it has jagged black that extends from the margin into the orange. So you're saying, well, I'm never going to get that close to see what that is, but the Jubas are common, and you'll see them around, and hopefully they'll stay long enough so you can figure them out. The other interesting thing of the skipper is, notice this goldy green spots. That's where the male pheromones are in the skippers. And sometimes you have to actually look at those scales and say, are they golden or are they white, to know what that skipper is. The Red Admiral, you've probably all seen, named for the red stripe on the wing like the admirals in the Navy. Very common around water, and you'll find it taking nectar from places where the sapsuckers have drilled holes in the willow bushes. You'll find little rows of holes, and the nectar comes out, the sap comes out, and the red admirals love to go to those holes early on in the summertime. Here we're looking at some other blues. The Boideval blue is in the upper right-hand corner and also the lower left. The Boidevals have black dots on the forewings and white dots on the hind wing, with a little T-bone stake T in this part of the wing. Sometimes you're lucky enough to see it. It doesn't show very well here. The Echo Azure, which comes out in the spring, the early spring, lives a long time, and by the time they're aged, all of the colorful scales are gone, and it makes it very difficult to tell those blues apart from other blues. Melissa Blue is a charming butterfly. We love to find it. Quite often we see it in amongst dead grasses when we're out in the prairie. And here we're walking along, not seeing much. It's all dried up, stalks of grass, and out comes the Melissa Blue. The female has orange on the front and the hind wing. We used to call these orange bordered blues, but now they're Melissas. The Riegert's blue is fairly common, but it's the tiniest blue of all. And what you can see in the Riegert's blue is this black spot. So if you see a tiny blue butterfly, look at the black spot on the hind wing, on both the ventral side and the dorsal side. Several more blues. Rocky Mountain Dotted Blue has heavier markings, a bit of grayness in the scales on the ventral, orange row of spots on the male and the female. It looks a little bit heavier. And these particular dotted blues grow only where the species of buckwheat or sulfur flower grow. So they're unique to this area. Very common. You'll see them when you're hiking in the water puddles, maybe by the hundreds. The Arrowhead blue is the largest blue in our area, And look at all the arrow spots you can see. If you look at the hind wing, there's a big arrow attached to the body, and then many little arrows that point toward the center. The Hops azure is a blue that's on the endangered and rare list. And guess where you'll find it? Well, look for the hops bushes in the foothills, but they only live as adults for about 2 weeks. So you have to go up the right time in maybe the 2nd or 3rd week in June, or maybe they'll last till July. I hope you'll see this. If you find hops bushes, stay there for a little bit. See if you can see some tiny blues flying around. The Viceroy is really common around Walden and the pond where the children go down a step and do pond studies. Big and beautiful butterflies, look somewhat like a monarch, but the veins are more heavily marked. And also there's this black line that goes through the hind wing of the Viceroy that the Monarch will not have. It's about the same size as the Monarch, maybe a little bit larger. The queen butterfly on the right hand is one that only comes up here in the late summer. It comes from the south, maybe the Rio Grande, and it belongs to the same genus as the Monarch, but it's not as orange. It has fewer spots. This one has been chipped by birds maybe, or maybe the wind knocked it around a bit. See the chips out of the wing on the right-hand side? This chip could have been a bird bite, or this one. And also this is a male, you can tell that because it has claspers that are common in the females and in the dragonflies, of course. Common alpines live where the bogs and the marshes are. And they're just delighted to see. You see this soft black butterfly flying around, and it's so charming because otherwise you're walking in cattails and muddy plants below your feet. It's a beautiful butterfly. Oh. Don't know how to get these things off. The checker spot, the silvery checker spot, I always know this one because of the black spots that are large and in the checkers. Do you see the black spots? And I've always associated its species name, which is Nycteus, with nicotine. Oh, a long ways to remember this, but nicotine spots on the fingers, nicotine spots on the hind wing of the silvery checker spot. You'll always find these around water. The northern checker spot maybe is not as common up in the higher elevations. Rocky Mountain Parnassian is the largest swallowtail that we have. Where are the tails? There aren't any. The Parnassian does not have any tails, but it has enough structure like the swallowtails that's the group it's put into. Look at all the fuzzy scales around the head and the body. Those are known to keep heat next to the body and to keep the wing muscles warm. This butterfly often lives where it's much cooler, from Estes Park elevation clear up into the tundra. And so they can take in the heat from the sun because of their blackness and keep it warming the body with the long scales. Those aren't hairs, those are scales. A Caribou Fritillary, big orange, not too common, a little difficult to know it. Coronis Fritillary, these two will stump you when you see them. If you can say, these are fritillaries, that's wonderful. The dun skipper is a friendly one we see on the hikes. Down on a warm trail, often these dun skippers will walk ahead of you. They'll fly ahead and land, they'll fly ahead and land, and you'll see them sip moisture out of the trail with their long proboscis. They don't have any markings that you notice on the dorsal or ventral of the wings. They're all dun colored. Sometimes the heads are golden or chartreuse, which is just wonderful. This dun skipper is on one of the best nectar plants that we have around here. And I'll name it soon. Bronze copper to the right. A lot of the coppers are new penny colored, and the bronze copper is around moist areas, lower elevation, very likely. This tawny edge skipper has tawny color, which is like the tawny color of a deer. That's where it gets its name. And the plant is dogbane, one of the best nectar plants. Russet skimmerling, beautiful russet color on the ventral part of the wing, but then if you're trying to identify this and you look only at the dorsal or top part of the wings, they're black. And you will see these spots show up in the wing. So these spots show up on the ventral and on the dorsal where the wings are blackish. Juniper hair streaks will lay their eggs in the very tips of the juniper branches that are growing. They're not very common, but they're wonderful to see. Hedgerow hair streaks. My co-author, Steve Jones, loves these because sometimes he sees them up in the pine trees by the hundreds. Whenever you see the name Arctic on a butterfly, you know that it's been around a long time, and it probably feeds on grasses, and it's been around when the glaciers were actually melting. If you look at the wing of the Euler's Arctic, look at how it looks like lichens, doesn't it? Just lichens that are growing, and these often fly in the meadows. The small wood nymph shows up more often in the late summer. Northern crescent. Crescents are a little hard to know. They're fairly middle-sized or small, and they don't have a lot of markings the way the checker spots do. But the way I know this one, can you look at the left-hand northern crescent, and you see a cartoon drawing of a puppy dog with 2 legs, a snout, and 2 ears? That's the way I tell the northern crescent. Besides that, it has big orange patches on the hind wings. Northern checker spot. Now we're into checker spots, and see the checkering pattern, how unlike the crescents are. Another checker spot. This one has, you identify this one because it's got orange on the tips of its antennae, and it doesn't really show there, but that's one of the identifying marks of it, as well as the orange marks across the abdomen. So sometimes when you're looking at the identification helps that are in a book, you have to look down at all the minutiae. You get used to that. Silver spotted skipper to me looks like a tropical butterfly that you might see in Texas. It's the largest skipper we have. It has white silver on the ventral surface of the hind wing. And when those wings open up, it's got gold on the dorsal of the forward wing. So fantastic, so much color, so much metallic coloring. And it will be found, thinking more about the sound in the background. Draco Skipper likes to be around water, especially the males around water. And if I remember this one by the dagger mark that's in this hind wing, there's a lot of patterning down the wing and a long little spot that looks like a dagger to me. At least that helps me remember Draco. Juba Skipper I showed once before. And look at the big patterning on the ventral part of the wing. That's one way we tell these skippers apart. Nevada Skipper has some green in it in the hind wing. And then another thing you'll need to know is, are these spots in the hind wing lined up, or does the bottom spot go forward toward the head or back towards the tail? Oh my, so many details. And a green skipper. Arrowhead skipper is the tiniest one that we have around here. It's rare and endangered. Often you'll find them nectaring on bull thistles. And what a picture with these golden yellow wings crawling around inside all the many flowers of the bull thistles. You can see the proboscis going down to here. It's picking up moisture and substances that it uses in producing the sperms, and the case around the sperm, the spermatophore, is where it uses these substances. These are males that you find down in the water. The females are up higher in the hills looking for nectar. Variegated Blue we found once before. Look at the black spot on the hind wing. And there's a male with more blueness. And the females of all the blues are brownish or grayish colored. They don't have as much blue. Greenish blue, here again, we have to look for something that helps us identify it. It's blue like a lot of the blues, but in the costa, which is the strongest structure in the wing, it has a black spot in the costa. And that's the way you tell the greenish blue from others. If it has its wings closed, sometimes you can see greenish color on that blue. Western branded skippers, very common in the autumn. And look at the decorations that it has on its hind wing. They're quite showy, and they're common. These males are down in the water picking up substances. Taxili skipper, they used to call a golden skipper. Look at all the gold that you see. This one's fun because it will land ahead of you on some tip of a grass or a leaf tip. It'll fly out and come right back again. So if you're patient, you can take good pictures of the Taxili skipper. The way I remember this one is it has a golden bar, a large golden bar in the group of yellowish bars under the wing. And I think of paying my taxes with gold bars. This species name is Taxilis. So the Taxilis butterfly has gold bar in its wing. Gray coppers you'll find around the marshes. It's rather large, easy to see, grayish all over, but it has wonderful orange spots along the hind wing and front wing. Now, once you know the coppers, okay, coppers have copper colored like a new penny, right? Uh-oh, Here's one that's a blue copper. And it's unlike other coppers. The under part of the wing is rather whitish with big black spots. And I look at the body, which is white. Blue butterflies have blue bodies. Blue copper butterflies have white bodies. And the dorsal part of the blue copper is beautiful, beautiful blue. Here's another picture of the Russet Skimmerling showing the dots that come through from the ventral. This one has a lot of new color. It's quite russet color, but as it gets older, it'll look more and more black. Now, if you see a butterfly that looks unlike everything else, it doesn't match the crescents, it doesn't look like a checker spot. It's bright orange. What in the world is it? It's a metal mark. And metal marks have white or metal color on the very tip margin of the wings. We have two kinds of metal marks here in Boulder County, but I've never seen the other one. Hope you'll see one near the water someplace. Variegated Skimmerling. It's a skipper, but it's tiny. So it's a Garita. And you know this because the size of it says Skimmerling. And the wing, the veins are all marked with white veins. Hackberry Emperor lives on the hackberry trees. Plant a few more, and you'll get these wonderful, lovely, large butterflies flying around your trees in the summertime, I hope. Look at all that color. Isn't it amazing? It's about a good 2.5 inches across. Late summer. Woodland skippers are very common in we're looking like late summer now, tending into August. And the woodland skippers have no crescents or no large marks on the ventral wing, on the ventral side of the hind wing. The uncas skipper on the right is brownish instead of being a lot of orange. And you'll find it more out on the prairie where the grasses are growing. Edis copper we found up at the Bluebird mine. We only have seen it for 2 years, and it looks very different. White underwing and black spots in the white, looks like Swiss cheese. And whenever these butterflies are either mating or thinking about it, it's so nice to be able to find the male Edith butterfly without a lot of markings and the female Edith copper right here together. It's so good to be able to see both of them together on a flower. Two-tailed, you should see this flying around, the largest yellow butterfly that we see floating around, and it has a way of patrolling. So if you see the two-tailed swallowtail go by your garden or where you are having a picnic lunch, watch for it because it'll go out and around, and in just a short time, about a few minutes, it'll come back over your area and it'll patrol out around that same area. So when we're out counting butterflies, if we end up with 5 or 6 two-tailed swallowtails, we say, wait a minute here. Maybe we only saw one that went around 6 times and we counted it over and over again. The Western tiger has broader black bands than the two-tail. On the left, the two-tail has quite narrow bands in the forewing. The tiger swallowtail has heavy, dark bands, more like a tiger. The Viceroy we've mentioned. Wiedemeyer's Admiral. Often you'll see land on the tips of willow bushes. because that's its food plant. And it will take nectar from sap where you find broken twigs. It takes moisture from carrion or dead meat, and also on the ground, if you find feces of animals, you can find Wiedemeyer's admirals there picking up the substances. A wonderful, wonderful ruddy copper. Look at that red. Look at the copper, new copper penny color. And the silver bordered, now this is a fritillary, belongs to a lesser fritillary group because it's much smaller. It should be high up in the Rockies, but we find it at Reynolds Ranch. It shouldn't be there, but we have found it with the potentilla bushes, and maybe it's got a colony that will show up there. We'll keep looking. Peck skipper lives out on the prairie, and it shows up in August. It's a bigger butterfly. It looks big and heavy. Mormon fritillary. The wings are rounded, and it's a fritillary. It has a lot of orange and black. It's a little bit smaller. It flies later in the season and not so common. Now the Arctic blue, you'll find in the Arctic, in the tundra, in the subalpine. And what you see here are spots by twos, two blacks, two blacks, two blacks, two whites, and rows of two by two in the Arctic, okay? Northwestern Fritillary is the fritillary that is brown. All the others are orange, and the Northwestern lives in the fall, in August, when the Rudbeckia or golden glow blooms along the streams. That's when you'll find the Northwestern Fritillary. The monarch, this particular monarch female, is laying an egg. She's ovipositing on the milkweed pod, a young milkweed pod, so the caterpillar will have some food as soon as it emerges out of the egg, hatches. The dainty skippers, dainty sulfurs are tiny, and they'll be around where it's hot, where you have a lot of gravel, you'll have a lot of heat. These come in from the south. They don't overwinter in our area, but they're delightful to see. And sometimes you'll see a dozen of them. They stay close to the ground, close to the warm rocks. The pine white, on the other hand, will be up in the tips of the pine trees. Now, this is the last one we look for. Here it is September that we've actually found it. In August and September, we go up around Reynolds Ranch or into the pine trees. And when we're driving along or hiking, we look up into the pine trees, in the tips of the pine trees, and we might see white butterflies, or we might see 5 or 10. They set up colonies in unique areas, and that's where the whites are. The pine whites are. They don't fly everywhere. So if you see pine whites, they're going to be up in the tip tops of ponderosas. In other states, they're up in the Douglas fir more commonly. If you're lucky, the butterflies will come down to get some nectar before they go back up into the trees again. But you'll have to wait into late August for these. The common wood nymphs, we're going into fall now with the brown colors. The wood nymph has this characteristic, beautiful eye spot. The Buckeyes come in from the southeast, from Missouri or the southeast states, and they only show up in August. They're usually not here earlier. The Milbert's tortoiseshell has colors on it that look like a sunrise, and You can find these in the spring. They're around now. They'll have a couple of broods during the year. So one of them you can see now, adults, but also you can find the adults again in August, but they have new eggs. They mate and lay eggs, caterpillars, and new adults. And these Milbert tortoiseshells tend to overwinter. They hide where it's quite dry. The sachem is another little skipper type. And John Barr found this wonderful single creature. It was there for 2 days. It's most unusual. It's you can find it in Utah, but not very often here in the county at all. So in 2021, we found 95 species in the open spaces. Altogether, 2004 to 2021, we found 129 species on record with the North America butterflies, who's our lister. 203 butterflies are recorded. And the reason we aren't seeing more in our group is that this list includes the ones that live in the alpine and the subalpine. We don't have any open spaces that we go into. I'd like to thank so much the people that helped me today, Deborah, and for setting this up. And I especially thank people who are still tuned in and watching this. Thank you. Susan Spalding and Kevin Grady and Amanda Hatfield have been our ranger contacts in the open space. Christian Nunes is a lepidopterist with the city parks, and he really knows the local butterflies and birds and hawks. Big helper. Boulder County Nature Association published our book, and if you get a hold of one of those books, one of the pages that really helps is at the very end of the book. It shows you the phenology. It will show the elevations at which the butterflies fly, as well as the month that you will find the butterflies. I put this in to invite you 4th of July to come to Calwood. We have an annual count there. We've done it for 38 years. And we have all kinds of anybody's who come. It's a public group. Deborah, can I turn it back to you?
Yes, thank you so much, Jan. We'll take a bunch of questions here in just a couple of minutes, but I wanted to show you, this is the book Jan is talking about.
Are there questions that anyone has that I could help with?
Yeah, we'll get to those in just a second. And this book is, Jan donated this to the Volunteer Naturalist Center, as well as the inventory records that she took. So any of the naturalists that want to refer to that, or staff, we will have copies of that at the Naturalist Center. Carlos, do you want to ask some of the questions?
Sure, I can do that. Give me 1 second here.
Sure.
I'll start off with the questions that are in the Q&A, and then I'll move over to the questions in the chat. So Jan, the first question is, if you don't specify male or female in your photos, do the males and females look the same?
I'm thinking she's not hearing us.
Jan, can you hear us?
She couldn't find her volume earlier, so I'm thinking that she's not hearing. What we can do is we can get these questions to Jan and have her answer them and get them to all of you. That might be a solution. Do we have a way of capturing those questions, Carlos?
I think so. I think the chat gets recorded, and I'll make sure that I'll jot down these questions that are in the Q&A.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks so much to Jan. She's such a wealth of knowledge. And I love all the little tidbits she shares.
I'm trying to unmute,
Okay.
but I can't hear you.
Okay. We'll just, yeah, we'll go ahead and get the questions answered and send those to everyone. So thank you all for coming, and especially to Jan for all her wonderful knowledge sharing. We really appreciate it.